Hello and welcome to this Philbert Flies review of Flightbeam's Washington Dulles scenery for Microsoft Flight Simulator. You join me here on approach to runway 19 Centre. As ever, I'm starting with an approach to give you a look at the surrounding area and the opportunity to gauge the performance of this add-on on my computer, which is comprised of an i7-8700K processor with 32GB of RAM and a 1080 Ti graphics card. On the subject of performance, you will notice some stutters and pauses in this video, both during the approach and when we're looking around later with the drone camera. While these look worse on the video than they did in the sim, I've definitely experienced a slight performance hit with this scenery. After filming this review, I uninstalled the Flightbeam scenery and did an approach to the default airport, and it was much smoother. That doesn't necessarily mean you'll experience stutters like I am. After my review of Digital Design's Salzburg, an airport which causes a similar performance hit to this one, some viewers reported much smoother performance than I was getting on systems very similar to my own. But it is something to be aware of. Anyway, enjoy the rest of the approach and the landing, and I'll speak to you again at a gate when we'll have a good look around this airport in different weather and lighting conditions. Welcome to Dulles. We're parked up here at gate Bravo 66 on the B concourse, and the first thing we'll do is have a little look at the jetway connecting. Very nice job, I think you'll agree. And while we're here, let's take a little look at the modelling and texturing on this custom jetway. These are very similar to the default models, but we have a lot more detailing, including these rust spots, the discoloration on the metalwork, and all in all, it looks very, very nice. Let's move on to having a look at the terminal buildings, their modelling and their texturing. So on pulling up to this building, I was very, very impressed. There's a good amount of detail included in the textures, which you will see as we get a little bit closer. So we've got a good amount of weathering. You'll notice these stains and marks all over the place. There is a little bit of repetition with the textures, but not so much that you would necessarily notice it if you weren't looking for it. It's also worth noting that the windows have textures of their own. They're a little bit stained and a little bit marked, which makes them look very lifelike. If we get in nice and close to this brickwork, you'll really appreciate that the textures are pretty high resolution. They're not the sharpest we've seen, but they are crisp enough for me, and they certainly look very, very good when you are looking at them from the cockpit. You'll have noticed by now that we have a model terminal interior, so while we're here, let's pop in and take a look. So it's not the most detailed terminal interior we've ever seen. In fact, I would say it's one that is designed to be viewed from the outside, and from the outside it looks very, very good. From the inside we've got just enough detail to keep it interesting, but unfortunately we do have that old issue of the windows completely disappearing when viewed from this side. So for the rest of this review, I think we will stick to looking at the interiors from the outside, because that's what they're designed for after all. This is one of the ramp towers at Dulles, and again it's modelled and textured to a very, very high standard. Just take a look at these handrails around this walkway. They look very, very lifelike, with a lot of discoloration and weathering. There's no interior modelled in this tower, but we do have PBR materials used, and as you can see the windows are nicely reflective when viewed from the right angle. And while we're up here, we may as well take a look at the roof of this concourse building. And again, it's very nicely textured. The textures aren't as crisp as those on the sides of the building, but nor would you expect them to be. They're certainly more than good enough. And there's a reasonable amount of detail and 3D models on the roof as well. Here we have the A concourse, and again, the quality of the modelling is fantastic, with some really nice details included. The texturing isn't quite up to the standard of the B concourse, and there are one or two areas where it really doesn't look too good at all. These doors, for example, you'll notice these no entry signs are very pixelated, very low resolution, and also slightly stretched from the looks of them. But in general, the texture work is absolutely first class, and it feels very lifelike indeed. There's also a good amount of ground clutter around this airport, not only here but in general, with various vehicles, luggage trolleys and that sort of thing scattered around the place, which again adds a lot of life to the airport. This is the C concourse, and once again the standard of modelling and texturing is very high. Now you'll notice that there are two repeating textures here. This is identical to this, and that's a little bit of a shame, but it's a very minor point, I think. We don't have any transparent glass or interior modelling here, and nor did we at the A concourse, but we do have PBR materials and the windows look pretty convincing to me. Here we have the main terminal and the Zulu gates. Now again, the quality of the modelling and texturing is very nice, as you can see, but the jetways just don't quite fit for some reason. If we have a look around here, you will notice that the staircase actually sinks into the ground, and in general they just look a bit too big for the building, so I don't know quite what's gone wrong here, but this could do with a little bit more work, I feel. The main terminal building at Dulles is a very impressive piece of architecture, and Flightbeam have done a great job of recreating it with some top-notch modelling and some super crisp, very realistic weathered textures. You'll notice we have some transparent glass here and a partially modelled interior. Now again, this is designed to be viewed from the outside rather than the inside, but we'll pop in and take a quick look anyway. The terminal looks really nice from the land side as well. We've got a good amount of clutter included. We have cars not only parked up but also pulling into and out from spaces, which is a really nice touch. We've got some good structures, we've got canopies, we've got road signs, and overall it's a very convincing representation of the front of an airport. The only thing that lets it down, in my opinion, is the quality of the ground textures, which are not the sharpest. There's a mixture of default satellite imagery and some slightly better textures, but it's a little bit of a shame that they are not super crisp. It does detract from the experience of visiting this part of the airport. Here we have the old cargo ramp, and aside from a little bit of carnage in the car park here, it looks pretty good. They've done a great job of populating the ramp with some weathered containers and other ground clutter, which helps it to feel very realistic indeed. And we also have a nicely textured building. If I had one criticism, it would be that these textures seem a little bit dark to me. Compared with their surroundings, it's very hard to make out any detail, but this could just be my perception. That might be what it looks like in reality. As we head further north towards the new cargo apron, you'll notice that we have some static aircraft here. We've got a few FedEx freighters, and beyond them we have a couple of passenger airliners as well. You will find passenger airliners on some of the remote stands nearer the terminals, but there aren't any taking up gate space. So the new cargo terminals look very nice. Again, we've got a high quality of modelling and texturing, and they look very lifelike. This is the GA terminal and GA ramp. You'll notice that the ground textures out the front are nothing to write home about. They look very much like the default satellite imagery. But things on the apron itself are quite a lot better. You'll notice that we have some nicely textured hangars, and also some good quality static aircraft models. And to the west of these we have a few more static aircraft, a few twin-engine turboprops and bizjets, which also are done to a very high standard. The ground textures at this airport overall are absolutely superb. They're nice and crisp, nice and high resolution, and I really like the ground markings. They are probably the most realistic I've seen. Some of them are more faded than others, none of the lines are perfect, none of them are too bright. They look very lifelike indeed. Flightbeam have made very good use of rubber markings and other discolorations and imperfections in the ground, which really do make it feel like a very lifelike airport. The materials used on the apron match pretty closely with the real thing, but if I had one complaint it would be that they are slightly too grey. If you have a look at satellite imagery of the real airport, the ground has a slightly more beigey colour. And talking of a slightly more beigey colour, they've nailed this 100% with some of the remote taxiways, so I'm not quite sure why they didn't use this same texture or a similar texture for the aprons themselves. The runways here look absolutely fantastic. The textures used are super crisp, the rubber markings are absolutely accurate, and the materials and their colours match the real thing probably better than any airport I've reviewed to date. Absolutely fantastic job. The grassy areas in general look very nice indeed, but there is the odd anomaly where there is no grass covering the satellite imagery, which leads to sort of weird blurry bits like we have here. Very small point, and there aren't too many of them, but they are there. Even the textures used in between the taxiways and the grass are really good. They're pretty high resolution, they look just right, and the taxiway signs are fantastic as well. Very nicely modelled, very clear and easy to read. This airport looks really fantastic after dark. The apron night lighting is some of the best I've seen, and I particularly like the halo effects around the floodlights when you look at them. The lit up terminal interior also looks very good. It looks very lifelike, not too bright, and although unfortunately there's no window tint when you look from the outside, it still gives a pretty convincing impression of a terminal interior. There is inevitably a noticeable difference in quality between the concourses that have transparent glass and modelled interiors and those that rely on flat textures. However, even these flat window textures don't look too bad at night. I've seen plenty worse and not too many that look better. The control tower looks pretty realistic at night, as does the car park and the building next to it. The terminal building looks fantastic, and the landside area in front of it looks pretty good too. As you can see here, the high quality of the apron lighting is continued all the way around the airport, all the way up past the cargo terminals to the GA ramp. You'll also notice that the taxiway centerline lighting, the taxiway edge lighting, and the runway lighting is all done to a very high standard. Here's Washington Dulles in the rain, and as you would expect, the ground textures look absolutely fantastic when they're wet. And unfortunately, also as you would expect, the transparent glass windows do pop out in the rain. They're not shrouded in poor visibility as they should be. But as I've said before, this isn't the developer's fault. This is something that Asobo need to fix. And to be fair, it doesn't look too bad at this airport compared with some I've seen. Within the confines of what Microsoft Flight Simulator currently allows, I think Flightbeam have done a very impressive job of implementing snow here. You'll notice that some of the markings on the ground are partially covered in snow, we've got little gaps in the snow cover over the apron, and we've still got some visibility of the underlying textures, so it doesn't just look like a white sheet as we've sometimes seen. Of course, there are certain materials that don't support a covering of snow, and these taxiway edge textures are among them. You'll also notice that the runways are completely covered in snow, which doesn't look the best. It would have been nice to have seen these cleared somehow, but overall the airport does look pretty realistic. So, Flightbeam's Washington Dulles. What do I think? I'm very, very impressed. Yes, I found a few things to moan about, a bit more of a performance hit than I'm used to, the odd bit of blurry default ground texture which I'd have liked to have seen replaced with a custom texture, the odd jetway that doesn't quite fit, and a few dodgy bits of building texturing here and there. I'd also like to have seen transparent glass with interior modelling in place of the flat window textures on some of the concourses. But these tiny negatives are really totally eclipsed by the good points, the truly outstanding ground textures and ground markings, the exceptionally realistic night lighting, the ultra-realistic runways, the good-looking snow, the good use of ground clutter, to name just a few. When I'm looking at an airport, what I'm really interested in is A, does it feel like a real airport, and B, do I want to fly here? The answer to both these questions is a resounding yes. Flightbeam have once again created an incredibly lifelike airport, and I wholeheartedly recommend it. So there we have it. I hope you found this review useful. If you have, do please click the thumbs up button down below, subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and if you'd like to really support my channel, you can make a donation using the Streamlabs link in the top left now, or via the buymeacoffee.com link in the video description. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you again soon here on Phil But Flies. All the best to you. Bye bye.